Welcome to another edition of Chaplain John with Chaplain John Sayers, featuring special reports and interviews with people doing kingdom ministry in Tulare County and beyond. And now, here's Chaplain John.
Hey, this is Chaplain John again. I am doing this on my YouTube, if you're watching this, but I'm also doing it on my podcast. Now, if you ever want to hear my podcast, go to chaplainchat.podomatic, and Podomatic spelled PODOMATIC.com, and then you can get on. You can hear my other podcasts. Well, I love on my YouTube sometime and my podcast. I love to interview authors of books. That's really fun to do. Well, I'm reviewing an interesting book right now. It's called The Church Wherever You Go. There it is. The Church Wherever You Go. There it is. And it's an interesting book. I know the author because the author is me. I wrote the book. And I've got a good friend, Peter, who was my editor, my proofreader. Gail was my proofreader too. They really challenged me, encouraged me to write a book. And I've had this book in my heart for some time, so now it's in print. The Church Wherever You Go, there it is. In this book, I will share where I see the church all around us, not just in that place you go to on Sunday or Saturday, but it's all around us. Wherever two or three are gathered in His name, I think there's the church. Today I just got back on a bus. I take a bus a lot more now. I had a meeting downtown and came back, and I was the only one on the bus this time. It's about a 20-minute ride back to my stop where I walk home. And the bus drivers, some bus drivers are just so engaging. They want to talk to the people. And I could tell. We had a great talk, just the two of us, for 20 minutes. It was really cool. I have to feel, I kind of think that this guy may have been a Christian. I didn't ask him that. But we engaged, we connected. And, I could have had another chapter in this book called The Bus Church, but I wrote this book after I started writing on the bus. The book is not long, by the way. It's a very small book, only 95 pages. It's an easy read. I've had people tell me, easy read, and they've enjoyed reading it, and that's kind of cool. You can get the book, by the way, on Amazon. All you have to do, just Google in The Church Wherever You Go. There it is, and you'll see this cover. Because again, in every chapter is where I see the church. My first chapter, for example, I shared about this already. You can go back and look at, hear my other podcasts and go back on Facebook, because I'm putting these on Facebook too. But my first chapter was called The Camp Church, because early in my life, ministry, in my mid-20s, actually, I was 17 through about almost 30, I was involved in Christian camping. And I called that a church. Great memories there. By the way, my wife, Gail, and I, actually, we met at a Christian camp. We were on staff together at a Christian camp. We got married together at a Christian camp. And so that was the camp church. And you can read that. Chapter 2 was called The Rescue Mission Church. And for a brief time, I actually did serve as a chaplain in the rescue mission. Gail, during that time, did the women's program. I was the chaplain for the men and the women. And Gail has a really interesting part of that chapter 2, the Rescue Mission Church. And I shared something. You can go back, get the book, you can read that, where I think the church should be more like the Rescue Mission Church. Check that out. But chapter 3 was probably one of my longer chapters. It was called The Jail Church. And I was, again, the chaplain at Tulare County jails for 15 years. Great stories there, I think. Check that out. But chapter 4 is called The Hosptial Church. And I'm not going to read the whole chapter to you, but I want to just read a little bit of how this chapter begins. Chapter 4, here we go. The Hosptial Church. I was sick, and you looked after me. Matthew 25, verse 36. NIV. After I retired from being a chaplain in the jail church, I started working as a chaplain at our local hospital. When on call I go in when patients request a chaplain for prayer and or counseling during my scheduled hours. This is another one of my churches, the Hosptial Church. Once in a while, that call comes very early in the morning or very late at night. Worship services take place 24/7 at the Hosptial Church. I'm not sure who plays the role of a pastor in this church because we all serve in special ways. Over the years, I have served with some great people in my other churches. Yet, coming to the Hosptial Church, I am not working alone, but alongside a great team who are great people who are part of the team. Doctors, nurses, security, phone operators, kitchen workers, custodians, and yes, even chaplains are a part of this team. The team may work different shifts, but their worship services go on 24/7. In other churches, you wear a mask to hide your pain, your fears, your frustrations, even anger. Some of us even put on a mask to fool others and ourselves when the possibility of death is right there in front of us. Yet in the Hosptial Church, all masks comes off, except the ones we have to wear now because of COVID. Once the chaplain rolls into the hospital, the chaplains roll in the hospitals to provide hope, comfort for the patient and family when they come into the Hosptial Church. I have a section here that throughout the book, I call putting on the pastor's hat. It's kind of like, okay, I'm getting in my pastor's mode now. Let me read this to you. Putting on the pastor's hat. This time it seems strange to use putting on the pastor's hat because I'm not even sure in this special church who is the pastor. But they do have chaplains. In my brief time on call as a chaplain, I've heard a ton of stories, but I think I'll just share a few that I'll never forget. I got a call to go into the emergency room, ER. I was told that a terrible accident happened, and the patient's mother was one of the nurses. When I got there, it was pre-COVID, so the masks were not required. I looked into the family and saw the nurse holding the hand of a small child. I introduced myself and asked if they would like prayer. In tears, the mother said yes. I have learned that God always answers prayer, but not always in the way we expect, but always in the best. If I were a parent in this case, I would want God to heal my child, but that was not his will. They had to put the son on a helicopter to transport him to a children's hospital in hopes of help. The mother and father had to travel by car. While on their way to the children's hospital, their son died. It must have been 6 months later when I was in the hospital. This time, we were wearing masks due to COVID. I was about to leave when one of the nurses wearing a mask said she would show me the way out. When we were out of the unit, she took off her mask and started to cry. She said, "Chaplain, I recognize your voice. You were the chaplain that was in ER." She was the same nurse whose son had passed away. She thanked me for being there for her and her family. She also said in the future, whenever she sees me, if she can, she will ask for prayer. Sometimes I wonder who gets the bigger blessing, the patient, the family, or the chaplain. When I think of that moment and others, I thank God for using me on this mission field. Now I have another section that I call the Psalms 23rd and the Hosptial Church, in the Hosptial Church. Now, I go back and read. Sometimes as a chaplain, I might get called just to see one person. Sometimes when I'm in there, that one person can turn into 3 or 4 others. This time, I was in the hospital for one person. I had 3 others to see, 4 people. Long day for me. And sometimes when I don't know what to say, and a lot of times I don't know what to say, I listen, I don't have any words. I share the 23rd Psalms. Now, my wife and I have been married for 41 years. Gail has had that 23rd Psalms memorized probably before we got married, but she has it memorized by heart. When I was a chaplain in the jail, I finally memorized it. As a pastor, many services, I'd open up my Bible and read it, very sincere, the 23rd Psalms, but I never memorized it. I finally got around to memorizing it. And here, my heart, my head, the 23rd Psalms. And there are times when I'm in the hospital, I really don't know what to say. When I was in the jail, there are times I didn't know what to say. I would say, would you like to say the 23rd Psalms? And even if they didn't know it, I had them repeat it after me. Well, that's because now I memorized it. So when I was in the hospital, I remember this 4 times, and that the situations are in the chapter. You can read the situations, but I shared the 23rd Psalms. Here's how I want to close off this podcast, this chaplain chat. How I want to close off the Hosptial Church. I want to do the 23rd Psalms. I want you to hear it. Maybe you might want to repeat it after me. And when I'm done, I'm not going to preach on it. Oh, man, I'm tempted to give you my message on the 23rd Psalms, but nah. Sometimes that's all we need to say, if we need to say anything, is the 23rd Psalms. So I'm going to say it. I'm going to say amen. And that's going to be the end of this podcast, this YouTube on the Hosptial Church. 23rd Psalms. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. You make me lie down in green pastures. You lead me by still waters. You restore my soul. You lead me on the path of righteousness for your name's sake. For even though I go through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemy. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. And surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen.